And Franklin Roosevelt, not unlike Herbert Hoover, was very, very wary of massive departures from orthodox economic theory. So yes, Roosevelt embraces the idea of Keynesian deficits as a way to stimulate the economy, but he only embraces that as an explicit idea, as runs a deficit for the explicit purpose of stimulating the economy in fiscal year 1938. It's the first time he really embraces that concept, and he okays a deficit in that year of $3 billion, again about 3-4% of GDP. So again, the reputation of the New Deal as this wildly irresponsible deficit spending proposition is just enormously exaggerated. Okay, I'm going to come back to Ronald Reagan. Again, you're wondering why is a picture of Ronald Reagan in a presentation about the New Deal. I'll come back to that. But I want to go back to this one just for a moment. I'm sorry I haven't broken this slide down better so you can see it more clearly, so let me explain it to you. Again, this is total government spending as a percentage of GDP, not federal spending. This is federal, state, local, irrigation districts, sewer districts, you name it, everything that qualifies as a government entity. And you see here on the eve of the Depression, it's a little over 9% of GDP. The federal government share of that was about 1/3, about 3% of GDP. The rest is state and local, okay? So there are two things important to note here. Number one, all government spending summed together, federal, state, local, and so on, as a percentage of GDP is quite low on the eve of the Depression, roughly 9%. And secondly, within that 9%, the lion's share is state and local, and the minor fraction, about 3% of the 9%, is federal. Today, that's it. Those proportions are just about completely reversed. Today we spend, again, according to this one, roughly 33% of GDP is government spending, all government spending. And in that picture, the 33%, state and local is about 12 or 13%, and federal is about 20. So not only has government in general expanded tremendously in the last 3/4 of a century, but the ratio of state and local to federal spending has just about reversed itself from this earlier era. This is an elaborate way of saying the federal government is a bigger deal today by a long shot than it was on the other side of the Great Depression of the 30s. Okay. All right. So that's just some background information about the scale of the crisis and about the role of government as measured very crudely and quickly by tax revenue and percentage of GDP. All right, let me just ask you, this will help me make my own way into the subject. What do you, when you think, or when your students hear about the New Deal, what do they think? What are the things they associate with it? What do they think they know about it?
Well, social programs. They start thinking Social Security.
That's if you know nothing else, that's a good one. Social Security. That is a great one to know. Okay. Yeah. What else? I mean, in my view of things, in my experience, many people in our society to this day use the New Deal as a kind of marker for the notion of big government, big intrusive government. You could still score points in political debate today by citing the New Deal as where it started to go down the chute, because that's when government got big and intrusive and so on and so forth. Do your students come in the classroom with that idea in their heads or not?
Yeah.
Or do they start with Social Security?
Well,
Start with the New Deal.
Louder, please.
They start with the New Deal thinking that government became powerful and started controlling people's lives.
Okay. Government became powerful.
and they have that idea to switch from laissez-faire to government
Okay.
intervention.
Okay, the migration from laissez-faire to more positive government intervention, yeah.
Yes.
Anything else?
I think in relation, when you tie it in to the issue of universal health care, I think they take that and tie it in as government being an all in all for the ills of society, especially when you're talking about issues of poverty.
Okay.
That's the idea when the students come in. They usually make the connection with welfare in
Okay.
regards to, they don't look at social program across the board as being welfare, but they take that one entity of providing assistance for the outside of the various programs and job programs.
Okay. I'm surprised nobody has yet mentioned the Depression. I mean, what linkage, if any, what connection do your students make between the Great Depression as a, use a fancy word here, exogenous economic event, and the New Deal as a political program? What's the relationship?
Well, they see the New Deal as being sort of an answer or
An answer.
a response to the Great Depression.
Okay, if answer implies solution,
Right.
then we didn't get there. The Depression goes on until 1941.
Right.
So if the Depression, if the New Deal is to be going to be measured on the terms of how well it did as a counterpunch to the Depression, it's going to get a failing grade.
Right.
But is that the best way to measure the New Deal's historical importance or not?
No, it's not. I mean, but I'm saying you ask how the students come in and see.
Yeah, okay.
They come in with that. But of course, with a little more digging and research, they understand it's not.
Okay.
It wasn't, but
Anything else anybody wants to add about the preconceptions your students come into the classroom with? If any, maybe they never heard of the New Deal. I don't know. Have they?
yeah.
It's a phrase they know before they get to you? Okay. All right. Well, let me again refresh in your minds the matter I touched on earlier this morning about the relationship of Depression to New Deal. And again, just to ask the question again, a what-if question. What if there had never been a Great Depression? Would there have been a New Deal as we know it? I'll come back to that question in just a minute. Okay. Well, I'm going to use another $8 word here. Just a little bit of something I actually don't like to do in my own classroom, but I think it's appropriate to do with fellow teachers like you, and that's a little historiography. Just a little discussion of how historians in the last 70 years or so have tried to make sense out of the New Deal. Okay? And again, in the background of a lot of this is this underlying question of the relationship between Depression and New Deal, between economic circumstance and political program. Okay? It's a very important relationship, but often I think misunderstood. Okay. Broadly speaking, and I'm going to reduce this in pretty simple terms, a lot of very complicated and nuanced historical writing, but broadly speaking, I think there are three positions or three interpretations of the New Deal that we find in the rather large library of literature about this. Probably the interpretation that amongst professional historians is the most common and still the dominant view of this, although it's not uncontroversial, is what, again, for purposes of shorthand, I'll call the liberal or the progressive view. And in this view, it's associated with historians like, prominently, Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr. is probably the single most articulate, forceful proponent of this view, shaped a lot of subsequent scholarship on the matter. In this view, we see the fulfillment of a long-running, back to the time of the populists and the abolitionists and Andrew Jackson and Thomas Jefferson, this long-running effort to make the society more democratic, more egalitarian, more fair, to provide a wider scope of opportunity for more and more people, to be more inclusive, and so on. And the New Deal in this view is an instance, a chapter in this long-running story where government finally takes on responsibility and power commensurate with the complexity and power of the private sector over which it presides, and renders that private sector more equitable, fair, stable, and so on. And so the New Deal in this view is a good deal, okay? It's a very positive development for the society as a whole. That's one view, and as I say, that's probably the most common view amongst professional scholars of this. But there is an alternative view, and I'll call this one the conservative view, just for shorthand. The word is kind of self-explanatory. Interestingly, this view is by and large less common amongst historians and somewhat more common amongst economists, okay, or economic historians, although even there this is a highly controversial matter. But here again, it's the view I maybe caricatured a few minutes ago. That the essence of this view is that the New Deal is the beginning of the end of American liberty and freedom, that this is the moment when government expanded wildly and irresponsibly and created this bloated, aggrandizing, bureaucratic beast that has somehow ever since inefficiently interfered with the wondrous efficiencies of the private market, and this is the beginning of the end of American exceptionalism. I'm overstating the case, but I think you probably get it. Now, there is a third view that actually had that I'm going to call the revisionist view, sometimes called the new left view. It had a kind of a short shelf life in the 1960s and 70s, but it generated a lot of revisitation of the New Deal. It's associated with writers like Howard Zinn, who probably is familiar to some of you. And in this view, all these things again turn on the relationship between Depression and New Deal. In this view, the Depression presented a unique and priceless opportunity finally to move American society toward a full-blown, near socialist welfare state, and the opportunity was lost.